everybody, welcome to Lessons with Troy. Well, in today's lesson, we're back to the C6 LapSteel. I have my Asher 8 string here, tuned C, E, G, A, C, E, from string 6 to 1, right? And for all you 8 string players out there, my 7th string these days, I tune to a B flat. And then my 8th string, I tune to a G. So that should give me something like a C13 chord. Right? Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be focused on the song All of Me. We're going to be learning the chord progression to it, and we're just going to go chord by chord and around, 1 or 2 chords at a time, and I'll show you kind of how to dance around a chord and move it into the next chord. This song is in the key of C, so it's great for learning your Nashville number system for chords, your 1, your 3, 6, 2, 5, all that kind of stuff. And we'll be talking about that in the lesson. And just so you know, for all my subscribers out there, I do have these jam tracks on the site for this lesson. And there's a jazz version of All of Me, or the chord progression to All of Me, and then a bossa nova version, which is really fun to jam along to. Okay, let's go ahead and jump on into this. And like I said, about 1 or 2 chords at a time, and then we'll kind of put the whole thing together at the end. So the first 2 chords is a C major 7th to an E dominant 7th chord. So C major 7th is going to be our 1 chord in the key of C. And then an E dominant chord, that's basically an E major chord with a flatted 7th in it. And that's going to be a major 3 chord. So normally in the key of C, an E chord would be an E minor chord. But in this case, we're doing an E major chord, or more specifically, an E dominant chord. So let me show you what this would sound like. So that's the first part that I kind of approached it as. So let's focus on that very first chord, the C major chord, our 1 chord in the key of C. C major 7th, right? A real easy way to think about how to get a C major 7th chord, or a major 7th chord in C6 tuning, is we're in the key of C, okay? F is on your 5th fret. A G chord is on my 7th fret, but that's my 4 and my 5 chord, right, in the key of C. The top 3 strings of my 5 chord give me a major 7th of my 1 chord. So the top 3 strings of that G chord here, G6 chord, more specifically, G6 chord, those are the notes E, G, and B, E, G, B. Right? That's my major 3rd, my 5th, and my major 7th of a C major 7th chord. So all you got to think about is we're in the key of C. What's the 5 chord of the key of C? It's a G chord. Grab the top 3 strings. And keep in mind, that's a C6 tuning with a high E on top, not a high G on top, but a high E. Okay? And that gives you that C major 7th. So a lot of times, sometimes all I'll do is, at like an ending to a tune or something, I'll hit that C6 and then slide that down to my 7th fret. So I've heard a lot of people like Bobby Ngano and Alan Akaka do something like that. A lot of times they'll do a volume swell like that, and slide down from a C6 chord on the top 3 strings down to a G6 chord, but then that gives you that C major 7th. So that's our 1 chord, okay? A couple other places I'll be playing that C chord would be what I call second position, which that means grabbing strings 3 and 2 under that G chord, right, the 5 chord of the key of C, and that gives me a C dyad, the 3rd and the 5th of my C chord. It's a C triad. So we got C6 up here, 12th fret. We got a C major 7th here, and we've got a C dyad here. Okay, keep in mind, this whole lesson I'm not using any slants for all these chords. It's all about knowing your grips. I'll talk about that a lot in the lesson. What I mean by that is when you're playing in root position here, let's say 12th fret for that C6 chord, you have 3 different grips that I like to teach: strings 3, 2, 1, 5, 3, 2, and 6, 5, 3. Basically 3 grips where you always omit that fourth string, right? You're just avoiding the fourth string. So once again, 3, 2, 1, 5, 3, 2, 6, 5, 3. And real quick, what that gives you, and I teach this a lot in my lessons, is when you do that, that's a C6 chord on your 12th fret, right? Different inversions of that C6 chord. If you move it back 2 frets, that makes that a C dominant chord. Right, and you always hear that in a lot of in Western swing. If you move it up 3 frets, that gives you a C minor chord. So we'll do different versions of those grips, moving it back 2 frets or up 3 frets, and also the second position major chords. Okay, so we got our 1 chord, right? That's C major 7th chord. Okay, our major 3 chord, the next chord, is an E major in the key of C, right? Normally it'd be an E minor. That would be your 3 chord, your 3 minor chord in the key of C. But if you just take an easy way to do this, right, is 12th fret is a C6 chord. If you just take your 3rd string and 2nd string and you move that back 1 fret, that actually gives you an E major chord, an E dyad in 2nd position here under your B chord. Your B chord is on your 11th fret. So that E dyad there, dyad meaning a 2-note chord, is right under that B, and that's an E major chord. That's a major 3 chord in the key of C. Now what I like to do here, let's focus on a root position E6 chord too. That's 12th fret, 14th fret, 16th fret that's an E6 chord. Okay, and remember how I was talking about those grips? Right, you move those grips down 2 frets from 16 down to 14, and that gives you an E7 chord, or more specifically an E9 chord. Different inversions of that E9 chord. What I like to do is to take this E in 2nd position here, and then we're going to walk it up 1 fret at a time to where it would be 2 frets behind my E6 chord. So here we go. E, walk it up to E dominant, right? Making that E a dominant. When I mean dominant, you'll hear me talk about that a lot. That's like an E7, E dominant 7th, E9. Those are all versions of an E dominant chord. So that's what we want to think of. But how you think about that is you think under your B chord is an E chord, and then you're going 2 frets behind your root position E, that's 16th fret. You're targeting the 14th fret because that's 2 frets back from E6, and that gives you that target of an E dominant chord. Let me show you how that sounds again from the top. E major or C major 7th here. Walk it up to E dominant. Okay, so those are the first 2 chords of the song. Now we'll just go 2 chords at a time. The next chord is an A dominant chord. Now normally in the key of C, an A chord would be an A minor chord, right? But this is going to be a major 6 chord, more specifically a dominant 6 chord, right? It's a A7, more specifically an A7 flat 9. We'll get to that in just a second. A real easy way to play the flat 9 chord and how to use it. Okay, so we just want to think root position here. That's where we're starting all these chords, just a simple root position. Root meaning where that 6th string, for all you 6th string players, that's the name of your chord. That's the root of that chord, right? That's an A note. This is an A chord. More specifically, an A6 chord. Now, this is an A7 flat 9 chord going to a D minor chord. So we'll talk about flat 9 in just a second, but the D minor is super easy to play and super easy to figure out. Okay, let's go to a D major chord first. A D major chord is on our 2nd fret, right? Just a D6. Remember the grips I was talking about? Strings 3, 3, 2, 1, 5, 3, 2. 6, 5, 3. Once again, 3, 2, 1, 5, 3, 2, 6, 5, 3. Basically just always omitting that fourth string for these grips. Okay, if you take those grips and you move that D major chord up to your 5th fret, that's 3 frets, not counting the fret that you're starting on, right? That's also called a minor third. That turns that D6 chord into a D minor chord, and that's real useful. So we're going from an A7 flat 9 to a D minor. You might say, I have no idea what, first of all, an A7 chord is, let alone an A7 flat 9 chord is. Okay, basically, a dominant 7th chord just has, instead of a major 7th in it, it has a flatted 7th in it, like a triad with a flatted 7th. So A, C sharp, E with a G note. Okay, so a neat way to, or an easy way to figure this out and to find this dominant 7th flat 9 is to take that 3rd string in root position there. That's the 6th of your chord, right? If you move that up 1 fret, that turns that 6 into a flat 7. So move from 9th fret up to 10th fret, okay? And if you move the root up 1 fret, that turns that root with the flat 7 in there into a flat 9. It's as simple as that. You just strings 3 and 2. Let me see if I can get a little better view for you all there. There we go. Strings 3 and 2. You just move that up 1 fret. Now once you move that up 1 fret, now you're in what I call diminished land, right? Where you can move that backwards or forwards a minor third. A minor third is just 3 frets, not counting the fret you're on. So this is how that A7 flat 9 is going to resolve into the D minor, right? So strings 3 and 2, just playing an A6 chord, right? Grab strings 3 and 2, move it up 1 fret in front of that A6 chord. That's an A7 flat 9. Now I can move that from here, 10th fret, to my 5th fret, to my 4th fret, resolving it into that D minor. Let me show you how that sounds. Okay, so let's start from the top with that C major 7th chord. And I'll show you what I mean. Here's C major 7th. E. D dominant. A. A7 flat 9. To D minor. C major 7th, top 3 strings of my G chord. E, it's a major 3. A, A7 flat 9. D minor. Okay, what's D minor in the key of C? That's our minor 2 chord, right? So that's a minor 2 chord. So far, all of me is a 1 chord, to a major 3 chord, to a major 6 chord, actually a dominant, actually that 3 chord is a dominant chord. The 6 chord is a dominant 7th flat 9. What's the resolve to that D minor or minor 2? Okay, so let's work on the next 2 chords in this song. Then you're going to